All right, Chapter 2, Fire on the Mountain, Lord of the Flies. More characterization of the island of itself on page 32. Ralph says, "We're on an island. We've been on the mountaintop and seen water all around. We saw no houses, no smoke, no footprints, no boats, no people. We're on an uninhabited island with no other people on it." We start to see more of the trying to increase civilization rules, laws, regulations with the advent of rules such as on page 33. We can't have everyone talking at once. We have to have hands up at school. People that have the shell are only the ones allowed to speak, and everyone has to be quiet. And we even have our first idea of consequences. So just like in chapter 1, we see the students are trying to bring civilization to the chaos of the island. I kept referring to a very human thing to do. As evidence of the power of the shell, repeated, despite the fact that Piggy gets no respect from anybody once he picks up the shell, the boys on the island listen to him. Something creepy, page 36, a small boy is dragged forward who has a strange sort of mark on his face that should ring sort of odd to you. A boy with a mark on his face. He won't speak, he's too scared to speak, but the students that bring him forward says he has been clamoring on about a snake thing that he has seen in the darkness, in the woods. Okay, again, coming from chapter 1, this idea of things that exist in the night, things that exist in the darkness, things that exist in the jungle versus things that exist on the beach in the sunlight. We have this duality of darkness and light, chaos and civility, evil and good. So those opposites, and those opposites are going to be reinforced as we progress through this novel. Page 36, the kids say, he says in the morning it turns into them things like rope in the trees and hung in the branches. He says it will come back tonight. So this thing that he has seen, this snake thing, transforms when the sun comes out. That's odd. So snakes, things that transform, these are very, if you remember your Sunday school, what other snake lurks in the woods that can change shape? That is very clearly a demonic, satanic reference that Satan is the trickster. He appears in the jungle to Eve and tries to convince her to eat the apples. That's a very old Christian symbol. So we should be wary of things that are living in the darkness, things that live in the jungle, things that transform. Very scary, especially to a young boy. So as we progress, we see that the boys decide they're going to set a fire at the top of the mountain to signal any incoming ships. So the boys all at once rush into the jungle and start ripping trees, limbs, and the limbs of the trees are described as dead and decaying, and so they quickly make a giant pile of these dead leaves and dead trees, and they try to light it on fire, and we get our first sort of physical man versus man conflict between Ralph and Piggy. Page 40. "Piggy, have you got any matches?" The other boys took up the cry till the mountain rang. So you imagine all the boys are chanting after Piggy that he has any matches. "Ma, you've made a big heap, haven't you?" Jack pointed suddenly. His specs, used them as burning glasses. Piggy was surrounded before he could back away. "Here, let me go." His voice rose to a shriek of terror as Jack snatched the glasses off his face. "Mind out, give me back, I can hardly see, you'll break the conch." Ralph elbowed him to one side and knelt by the pile. "Stand out of the light." So tell Piggy to move out of the light. So Piggy, to this point, is sort of the voice of reason. We talk about symbolism, the fact that he's wearing glasses. Glasses give clarity, give sight. And again, Piggy is the one often that brings reason, brings logic, brings common sense to the chaos of the boys. So the idea that Ralph's telling him to get out of the light. Light is also a symbol of light and clarity and knowledge. So when they're removed from Piggy, that's very telling, right? What's happening to the boys and what's happening to Piggy. There was pushing and pulling and officious cries. Ralph moved the lenses back and forth this way and that till a glossy white image of the declining sun lay on a piece of rotten wood. Almost at once a thin trickle of smoke rose up and made him cough. Jack knelt too and blew gently so that the smoke drifted away. thickening, and a tiny flame appeared. The flame, nearly invisible at first in the bright sunlight, enveloped a small twig, grew and was enriched with color, and reached up to a branch, which exploded with a sharp crack. The flame flapped higher, and the boys broke into a cheer. So I want you to envision the scene that this sort of ceremony of lighting the fire. We see a lot of ceremonies of lighting fires. Fire is the epicenter of the Olympic torch. Think about that. Campfires. I mean, think of how many ceremonies and rituals involve flame. And so you can imagine these boys who are chanting around this fire, and they're almost in like a trance. It's kind of creepy scene. We also noticed on page 43 something important is happening. The sun is going down. So this is the boys who are about to be plunged into night. Go back to chapter 1 and my thought about what does it mean when characters are sort of half submerged in light and darkness, jungle versus beach. Again, going back to the duality of good versus evil, chaos versus civility. Well, darkness is coming. The sun in the west, this is 43, the sun in the west was a drop of burning gold that slid nearer and nearer the sill of the world. All at once they were aware that the evening as the end of light and warmth. Bottom of 43, very interesting paragraph. He paused in the tumult, standing looking beyond them and down the unfriendly side of the mountain to the great patch where they had found dead wood. So here you have Piggy standing on this sort of side of the mountain looking one side or the other, and on one side you have the beach and civilization. On the other side you have, quote, the great patch where they found the dead wood. Then he laughed so strangely that they were hushed, looking with a flash, spectacles, and astonishment. They followed his gaze to find the sour joke. You got your small fire, all right. Now, page 44, I want you to pay special attention to this next passage. This might come up in discussion in class. I want you to notice all the instances of personification and simile. Remember, personification is the writing strategy where you give human characteristics to non-human things. So all the times that the fire is given characteristics of a human, and simile is a comparison between two things using like or as. So personification, simile, page 44, paragraph begins, smoke was rising here and there among the creepers and festooned the dead or dying trees. As they watched, a flash of fire appeared at the foot of one wisp, and then the smoke thickened. Small flames stirred at the trunk of a tree and crawled away. Smoke crawling. It's personification. Through the leaves and brushwood dividing and increasing, one patch touched a tree trunk and scrambled up like a bright squirrel. Ding. The smoke increased, sifted, rolled outwards. The squirrel leapt on the wings of the wind and clung to another standing tree, eating downward. So this comparison of the flame like a burning squirrel. Beneath the dark canopy of leaves and smoke, the fire laid hold on the forest and began to gnaw. Acres of black and yellow smoke rolled steadily toward the sea. At the sight of the flames and the irresistible course of the fire, the boys broke into shrill, excited cheering. More weird chanting and cheering. The flames, as they were a kind of wildlife, crept as a jaguar creeps on its belly toward a line of birch-like saplings that fledged an outcrop of the pink rock. They flapped at the first of the trees, and branches grew a brief foliage of fire. The heart of flame leapt nimbly across the gap. The flame leapt between the trees and then went swinging and flaring along the whole row of them. Beneath the capering boys, a quarter of a mile square of forest was savage with smoke and flame. The separate noises of the fire merged into a drum roll that seemed to shake the mountain. So the fire itself, my attack dog is protecting the family from probably the middleman. So the fire itself shakes the mountain. So interesting. So now we're dividing the mountain between the side that's on fire and the side that's not. The chapter progresses. Piggy starts losing his mind. Piggy takes the conch shell and just loses it on page 45. I've got the conch, just you listen. The first thing we ought to have made was shelters down there by the beach. It wasn't half cold down there in the night, but the first time Ralph says fire, you goes howling and screaming up there this here mountain like a pack of kids. We keep talking about this idea of group behavior. Why Piggy is the reasonable one. He is the logical one, the one that is thinking clearly, the one that is, maybe he's a little precautious, and he's obviously overweight. His name is Piggy. He's not a quintessential leader, but he says some pretty sensible things. Why is it that the boys go after Ralph, and every time Ralph says, jump, they say how high? Why don't they listen to Piggy? Well, that's something that we need to think about in terms of, leadership and charisma. Bottom of 45. Then you get back here, you build a bonfire that isn't no use. Now you've been and set the whole island on fire. Won't we look funny if the whole island burns up? Cooked fruit, that's what we'll have to eat, and roast pork, and nothing to laugh at. You said Ralph was chief, and you don't give him time to think. And then when he says something, you rush off like he paused for breath, and the fire growled at him. Right, interesting. He's in the middle of sensible speech about what they should be doing, and the fire, this thing that's ravaged out of control, seems to growl at him. So what is that telling us? Is there some evil force that's symbolized by the fire that doesn't like the fact that Piggy is speaking reasonably? It's an interesting addition there. And then finally, the chapter ends very ominously in a sort of foreboding tone that something bad could be happening. They realize all at once. Piggy, this is 46. Piggy stood up and pointed to the smoke and flames. A murmur rose among the boys and died away. Something strange was happening to Piggy, for he was gasping for breath. So Piggy is transforming. Something's happening to Piggy. And finally, like I said, the chapter ends with a very ominous implication that the boy with the strange mark on his face, who was talking about snakes in the woods and things that transform, has disappeared. Where is he? Nobody knows. We know that the sun is setting. We know that light is ceasing. We know that darkness is coming. We know that my son is crazy. Can you say hi? This is the boy with the mark on his face. He's coming for you, Piggy. What's going to happen in chapter 3? What do you think happens in chapter 3? Is it a good chapter or a bad chapter?